It might have got away with being a boring shambles and preposterously grandiose. Just about. But the truly irreparable damage inflicted on the BBC Sports Personality of the Year award was not losing that video linked to the winner. It was being exposed as irrelevant by the failure of Anthony Joshua to make the podium. Anthony Joshua did not finish in the top 3 of SPOTY despite his remarkable year. The heavyweight champion's omission from the podium exposed the show as irrelevant. Their omission of our world heavyweight champion from the top 3 left as massive a void on the BBC screens as all the major events which they have let fall into the grasp of rival broadcasters. Boxing may not be to everyone's taste, but far better to have spent the fortune squandered on Sunday night's naff extravaganza on bidding for the biggest of the fights which have driven a renaissance of the hard old game in this country. But the BBC doesn't do boxing anymore. Not even when a larger-than-life young man fights his way out of the mean streets to fill the great stadia at Wembley and Cardiff to the respective 90,000 and 80,000 capacities. Was anyone in that ivory tower called Broadcasting House paying attention as Joshua dragged his giant frame off the canvas to KO the legendary Vladimir Klitschko in one of the prize ring's epic battles? Had they done so, they might have made enough of a fuss about that heroic achievement for Joshua to garner the extra votes he needed to win SPOTY, for which he was the runaway favorite. Even the bookies make the odd mistake. They must have forgotten that the BB now focuses its regular viewers mostly on niche sports. The BBC no longer does Ashes cricket, Open golf or Lions rugby. To name by no means all. Not live. As for Premier League football, that went skyward years ago and whatever fell back to earth landed at BT. AJ was installed as the early favourite to win, but Mo Farah took home the trophy. Of course, if it's athletics you want, Auntie is for you. So her big prize went to Mo Farah, even though suspicions about his coach had kept him out of the top 3 for years, while third place went to Paralympian and Strictly Come Dancing contender Johnny Peacock. And, yes, hurrah for him. Then, when it comes to the Sunday before Christmas, the lobbyists for the more obscure sports get voting. This year they block balloted into second place one Johnny Raya. At first I thought they must have misspelled the surname of a posthumous American crooner. But this is Raya, not Ray, and apparently he spends most of his time riding motorcycles around Northern Ireland. Now 3 successive world titles are not to be sneezed at, but this has echoes of a quarter of a century ago when the BBC turned up its nose at fishing as a sport. Bob Nudd, the greatest angler of all time, received the most votes in 1991, but the Beeb claimed to have found a rule which disqualified all the ballots cast by his brothers in waders on a form published in Angling Times. Oh, really? How they could do with fishing now? Sorry, but Sky has reeled that in too. Had they blackballed Raya the way they did Nudd, then Joshua would have crept up to third. Although, since he has studiously avoided this pantomime at Christmas past and was only persuaded to go to Liverpool because he was odds-on to win, he probably preferred to remain seated. Joshua filled Wembley Stadium and rose from the canvas to knock out Vladimir Klitschko. Joshua put a smiling face on it. He saw the joke. If it really is personality they are looking for, then he has it in oodles, more than many previous winners. AJ could be seen laughing as Farah disappeared off the screen before he could say a word. But then Joshua knows, as do most of us, that he remains the superstar of Britain's biggest single sporting event of 2017. Had it been on BBC instead of pay-per-view, be sure it would have attracted millions more viewers than SPOTY. But that is not the rating which will concern the corporation. Sunday's numbers have been crunched at almost 4 million less than the 13.1 meters who tuned in to watch Saturday's Strictly final. In 2016, SPOTY was down from more than 10 meters viewers 5 years earlier to just over 6 million. Joshua knows he is still box office and the award has very little to do with personality apart from a disastrous £1 million comeback with Audley Harrison a decade and a half ago. Big-time boxing has been off BBC screens since the 90s. Back then Big Frank and ARRY ruled the airwaves. Joshua is one of many opportunities lost. Partly out of a faint disdain for prize fighting. To some extent in preference for squandering our license fees elsewhere. Like so many politicians, some BBC mandarins neglect to serve the constituents. boxing is big in this country. Joshua is the latest of several exciting fighters who could have rejuvenated BBC television sport. They would not come cheap. But on Sunday, as Joshua kicked his heels in the posh seats while an evening of fake exuberance, garish spectacle and monotonous self-importance droned on and on, the whole thing looked as dated as Dixon of Dock Green. And less fun. At this rate, it won't be long before the BBC Sports Personality of the Year is being broadcast live on Sky. Billy Joe Saunders shone magnificently in his victory over heavy-hitting David Lemieux. Billy Joe Saunders produced the finest boxing of his life to rout Canadian slugger David Lemieux in the sub-hero hostility of a Montreal suburb. It would have taken hanging, not mere hometown judges, to deny the Hatfield Traveller his unanimous victory. Saunders won every round, and but for a nod to the local gathering from 2 of the 3 officials, he would have scored a total whiteout in snowy Quebec. If not quite the ring masterclass acclaimed by some, since Lemieux was hugely disappointing, Saunders certainly put on a virtuoso performance in defense of his world middleweight title. It did appear that he has put his self-indulgences behind him and is now living the dedicated life demanded of the modern prize fighter. The British star showed his class and was rarely touched by his opponent in Quebec as his slick movement left Lemieux punching thin air. Saunders found time to turn pointedly away as if looking to see where one especially wild blow might have landed among the crowd. Better by far, Billy Joe, than the 4-letter insults. Better to make us smile, not frown. Saunders promptly called out the great Gennady Golovkin, threatening to take the best middleweight in the world to school. That is likely to prove presumptuous. But at the very least he has earned the right to try.